keep at it. Don't give up.
I would say do what you love and do the things that will inspire you, like the whole length of your project. Because it is a labor of love. So
yeah, don't work on something because you think it's going to be popular. Work on something that you want to see. That's the most important thing. I would also say be kind to yourself. I think everyone should be kind to themselves,
especially right now.
Yeah, just don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't turn out perfect. That's another thing too. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah,
usually it's not going to be perfect, especially if it's your first comic. It's not going to be perfect. You got to accept that.
Hello, my name is Annie, and you are listening to World of Webcomics, a podcast all about interviewing creative people who are telling their stories online. This episode is very special because I have 2 guests, so I think that this will be especially beneficial for you artist-writer teams out there. But I think that these guests are just interesting people in general, and I think that you're really going to enjoy what they had to say. I know I did, so let's go straight to the interview. All right, for those who do not know you, could you introduce yourself as well as what you are known for?
So I'm Belle.
And I'm Hazel.
And we're an artist-writer duo who make webcomics. We've been working on webcomics together since 2011, and our projects are Always Raining Here, and we're currently working on a comic called Electric Bones. Always Raining Here is a slice of life comic set in our home province of British Columbia. It's a fun sort of high school romance story, and Electric Bones is more of a dark space drama, I guess. It's a bit more mature than Always Raining Here, and it's our transition project from our first one to something that's a bit darker.
And the way that we work together is Belle is the writer and I am the artist. So we collaborate on all of these projects that way.
Mm-hmm. We also work on other things like novels, which are stories with illustrations in them. So I write those, then Hazel will draw that for them.
That's really good to know, all of your different projects. Where could someone find all of those different things?
So we have websites. So we have a website for Always Raining Here, and we have a website for Electric Bones. We host a lot of our novel projects on Patreon. So you can just sign up for $5 and they're all there. And we also post our comics on places like Webtoon, SmackJeeves, and Tapas. So those are sort of big platforms where people usually find our content on.
Excellent. Now, before we get into all your projects, I would love a little backstory on both you guys individually as well as how you became a team. So let's start with that. How did you guys meet and come to work together?
So I guess I'll take this one. Belle and I met in university anime club. We were both just looking for friends, I guess. And we both immediately had the same interests and tastes in manga and anime. And we just, I think within about a year or two of knowing each other, started the webcomic. Started always because we were bored and we were like, we really want this specific kind of comic to exist, and it didn't yet. So we, with basically no experience, started a webcomic.
That's the way to do it, just build experience by going through.
Yeah. It was a bit, we just charged into it and we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into.
I was basically a dormant artist. I had decided I wasn't going to pursue art with my life, even though I had loved it since I was a kid. And she was sort of like a writer that wasn't writing too much.
I never actually finished a story. Yeah. I'd written a lot of stories when I was a kid, but I never actually finished anything. So Always Raining Here was probably my first finished story I ever wrote.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned as a kid. Let's kind of go back to that. How did you guys both kind of discover your love for art and writing, respectively?
I think I've always been a big reader. I've loved reading books when I was a kid. I used to read every day. And when you grow up, you kind of if you're a big reader, you want to be a writer, I think. That's just sort of a natural thing that you want to do, is you want to write your own stories and get people excited. And I'd been interested in becoming a writer since I was probably about 11 years old or younger. And I just would write constantly, but I never really had a good way of wrapping a story up because I always wanted to write these big long epics, which was it was just my own.
And that was kind of in the initial plans when we first started Always Raining Here, was that it was an epic that spanned multiple years, and we got it down to within a few months.
I learned a lot making that comic because
Yeah, I think it's harder to learn how to condense something than it is to make something long.
Mm-hmm. That is actually really true. I've definitely found that sometimes our projects kind of escape our grasp and become these spiraling, sprawling things.
And it's especially dangerous when you're making a comic, because comic stories take so much longer to tell than a novel. A novel, you can write a scene in a page, but in a comic that might take you months to do because you need to illustrate each page.
And I guess for me, like I said, I was always an artist. Like I was a kid who wrote on like my first, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I wrote artist. And I was always into like anime and manga since middle school and high school and that sort of thing. So it kind of came naturally that I was into this. And I think, yeah, when I came out of high school, I thought that I was going to do something else. And when I started Always Raining Here, it reawoke my art passion. And I thought that I was like, I want to go to art school again. So I did that. And it was an experience. I've graduated now. So I've moved beyond that.
Because we met each other in a sort of regular standard academic university. And then she left after about 2 years of university there because she wanted to go to art school. It was about 3 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a while. And that's because she wanted to pursue art as a career after making ARH.
Yeah, with my like path that I took, I did not regret not doing art right away because I found like that passion. I feel like I wouldn't have had that immediately if I had jumped straight into art school. So that was good for me.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. And thank you for sharing that because I think it's really beneficial to hear like different stories. Like not everybody's path is very like linear.
Yeah, especially when you're dealing with in like post-secondary school or university, because you sort of are told that this is your future. It's like this is what you're choosing when you graduate high school, is that you're supposed to go in a route and you have to choose it when you're 18 years old. But a lot of the time people end up changing their minds or deciding that they actually really like a certain thing that they didn't think they liked before, and then they do something else.
I think you feel forced to make the right decision the first time. And that's the one that you're going to do for the rest of your life. And that's a big decision.
But that also hardly ever happens to people. People usually change.
But that's what you realize.
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you don't realize that.
Yes, all very true. So as people who had not finished projects separately and then are now doing these projects together, do you feel that working in a team was part of like what gave you the motivation?
Absolutely, yeah. Hazel is a person who likes to get stuff done, and I'm not a person who is naturally inclined to get stuff done. So that changed things very quickly for me. I would realize that someone was holding me accountable for getting things that I said would be done. She was like, where is it? You got to get this done. We're going to do this. Like every week we had to get the pages up. Every week I had to produce script content. Like it was somebody holding me accountable. And that basically was the reason why the comic even exists.
In the same sense, like Belle also holds me accountable too. So we both hold each other accountable when each one of us may not feel as motivated during that time, or to keep each other on track. When like, if you're by yourself, you might just give up if something is too hard. But when you're with someone else, like you have the motivation to like move through it.
Yeah, you don't want to let somebody else down.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing because I feel like it's easier just to let yourself let go of things for yourself than for someone else.
Yeah, so you have the accountability and the encouragement. Do you think that there are any other pros to working as part of a team? And alternatively, are there any cons?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of pros. I can't really think of that many cons, honestly. I would be, even when I work on my own solo projects, like when I work on the novels, I'll still consult Hazel about a lot of things. I'll get her to read my stuff over. I'll get her to tell me what she thinks about certain scenes. She basically acts as like a sort of unofficial editor, but she gives me a lot of input about how she thinks my stories can be improved. And that's just really handy because sometimes you get really wrapped up in your own creative space when you're making something. Or sometimes you let yourself be lazy and then somebody who read your stuff can easily point that out to you and tell you can't get away with it.
I think for my pros of working together as a team, like I actually don't have a ton of ideas that are attacking my brain at all times. So I like that Belle brings ideas to the table and then I'm like, this is what I want to draw from this that you're telling me. And then she can narrow it down because she has so many ideas.
Yeah, I'm kind of cursed with that. Ever since I was a kid, I always have way too many ideas of things that I want to do.
And I'm just able to help you like pick and choose from those or give you a direction.
Yeah.
In terms of cons, like there is always like disagreements, arguments, just emotional times that you go through working together. But I think that's just part of like working on anything that you care about. It probably is going to be emotional to some extent.
Yeah, even if you're alone, I think that getting frustrated or like hating what you're doing or getting mad at yourself would happen. So I mean, it's bad when you're getting a fight with somebody who you're working with, but I think that's going to happen if you're working on something like that anyways.
Yeah.
Even if you're by yourself.
Oh yeah, that's definitely relatable. I have arguments with me. So that kind of prompts me to ask as well, like to what extent do you guys kind of help each other out? Like, is there some overlap where you kind of workshop the story together or give art direction?
Yeah, totally.
I guess we'll talk about our process.
Yeah, let's talk about the process, because the steps that we go through the story is very collaborative from the get-go. So the initial concept, I come up with it, and then I sort of sit with it, and then like say let's talk about Electric Bones. When I created Electric Bones, I went through probably about 20 different story concepts before we settled on our final one. We knew what we wanted from the beginning. Because I consulted Hazel about this, because I know Hazel has a very, like, she wanted to do a story about robots. So I was trying to find a story that I know she would enjoy to draw.
That was my specific and only request.
Because when I'm creating a story as the writer, I know I'm going to enjoy it, but I wanted to make sure that Hazel has something that feels like it comes from her, like, equally, like this is something that can represent her as well.
And we were planning Electric Bones since we were working on Always Raining Here. The first plans of it are from 2013, and then we didn't start it until 2019. So that was like 6 years in pre-production.
Old ass concepts in there.
Yeah.
I went to go through like the story. So I think of like, I want to make a story that's like this. So I had an idea of doing. Should I like talk about some of the old concepts? We're not going to do them anyways. We had an idea to do like a murder mystery concept. We had an idea to do, or like I had these ideas and I would present them to Hazel, and then there was an idea to do sort of just more mysterious stuff set on like a planet rather than in space. And I would present these ideas to Hazel, and she would be like, it's okay. And
I actually rejected the idea that we went with, like originally, like however many years ago.
That was an old idea, and then I pushed on it. I was like, we're doing this idea.
I didn't like it, but I think there is a thing where old ideas can come back around after you've had so many different like iterations that you didn't like.
I think the thing with Electric Bones is that I ended up repitching it.
Yeah, to me.
Yeah, I sort of restructured the pitch in a way that, because I think you didn't like some aspects of it when I first suggested it, and then I retailored it, and then I'm like, this is a good one. I think we should go with this.
In any case, we like both work on that initial concept together to make something that both of us like find appealing.
Yeah, that's really important when you work with somebody else, because I think that a problem a lot of writers have who are looking for artists is that the writers want to make their pet project, not realizing that, or thinking of the artist who has to spend hours and hours of their life working on this thing. So having something the artist feels equally passionate about is really important.
I think it might be good to be willing to come up with a completely new idea if you like befriend an artist that wants to work with you.
Yeah, something you guys both want to do.
Yeah. And then your like project that you've had stewing in your head forever can come after that.
Yeah, if you end up developing a good relationship and the artist trusts you to make something that they'll want to draw.
Yeah. Unless the artist also gets really invested in your
I mean,
idea.
That would be
like
perfect.
That's totally okay.
Yeah, that would be like a match made in heaven, right? But
totally.
I really like that idea. I've never heard that perspective before of like, instead of a writer kind of like forcing this thing that they've had a very specific vision of on an artist, like be willing to sort of like allow that relationship to show through in the story as well.
Yeah, I think that we've definitely come across people who are writers who want to make a webcomic, but they need an artist. And I think that that's the major block in the road, is that they want to make something that's just them and not something that the artist wants to participate in as well. Because if you're doing that, the artist wants to get paid. They want to do like work for they're doing their labor for you in a way. But if it's something the artist wants to do, then you guys can team up.
And webcomics is something that initially doesn't give very much money, or like it's a labor of love. So the artist needs to be as invested as the writer. So I think that it's good for both sides to be willing to like move on that.
Yeah.
Even like at this stage in the game, Belle and I are running into things where her vision is different than my vision. And then we have to talk it through, basically.
So after the story concept is chosen, then I'll go into writing like big outlines and then more detailed outlines. I'd like write outlines that get more and more detailed that cover the whole length of the story. So I had the beginning, middle, and end all planned out. I have the major plot points planned out. I had the subplots planned out. And then this whole time I'm going back and forth with Hazel on them too, because I'm like talking about, this is how it's going to go. Does this sound good? This is how it's going to go. Does this sound good? Just to make things stronger, or to, it's honestly in a way kind of like just talking to somebody, because when you're explaining something to somebody, you find out the holes in it really easily. So you don't even need to like tell me what I need to do sometimes. I just like find it out when I'm trying to explain it to you.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll write the script. And the script usually starts as just dialogue. I'm a very dialogue focused writer, and I'll write the conversations out first. And that is something that really gets the story going usually, because that's just easy for me, is writing dialogue. And when I write the dialogue, I'll cut it in half usually, then I'll cut it in half again, and then I'll panel it out. So I'll put certain blocks of dialogue together into like a panel, and then I'll make those panels into pages, and then the script happens.
And you make sure each page is like interesting.
Yeah. So it usually has to end on like I read so many comics that I didn't need to research about how to construct pages, because you have an idea in your head about how the rhythm of a certain page is supposed to go. So if you read comics, you're already prepared for this.
It usually ends on some sort of interesting note
Mm-hmm.
or cliffhanger, or just something that will keep people reading like next time you post.
And it's good to have a variety of things happening on the page too. So if you're having a conversation, there should be like a point in the page where the conversation is like more information is revealed, or the conversation gets interesting. If you're having a scenery shot, that should be like something that grabs the audience's eye. There should just be something on the page that can get people excited.
Yeah. So, and that's still at this point, I will read over the script.
Oh yeah,
like,
you're there the entire time.
Yeah, I'm not absent there.
No.
And so then we move into like the thumbnails.
Thumbnails are the most collaborative part of our entire process. We used to not do this together, and we ran into a ton of roadblocks not doing the thumbnails together. And when we started Electric Bones, we basically decided it's like, okay, I had a really strong idea in my head about how I wanted the panels to look on the page when I was writing them out. So I doodled do you know what thumbnails are? Should I explain what thumbnails are?
Sure, you can.
Okay, sure. So they're like these they're only about like a few centimeters
like an inch
big.
and a half.
Yeah, like an inch and a half big both ways. And they're just miniatures of your comic page that are tiny sketches.
And they're so small that you cannot put in a lot of detail on it, and you should not put in a lot of detail on it, because it could be scrapped at any moment.
Yeah, the idea is that you do them really quickly so you can show your idea for the panel to somebody else. And then when that's done, then you can work on a more refined sketch of it.
Oh, the page.
The page, yeah. Yeah, when you're done thumbnailing the page. But it's just to get an idea of the camera angles, the layout, and like the close-ups, character expressions, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so Belle, this is a thing that we're doing, like that we didn't do for Always Raining Here. But in Always Raining Here, she just gave me the script and then I thumbnailed them, which was okay.
I don't recommend it.
But I think that sometimes I wouldn't capture like the shot that she wanted, or she originally thought of, like the angle.
Mm-hmm.
So now I consult her thumbnails and I make my own with my vision of what I think should happen. And sometimes they're not always the same. And I am like, no, I want to change this. And then she is like, no, it has to be this way.
Sometimes when you say that, it's only happened once very recently. But for most of the time, we are completely okay with each other's thumbnails.
Yeah. Usually it goes like
a lot of the time you take ideas that I have, a lot of the time you interpret your own ideas for the panels, and I think it ends up working out really well as a collaboration. Sometimes when we were being bullheaded about some certain things, we each have a very strong idea of what we want for the panel, and then we have to talk it out.
Yeah.
But most of the time it doesn't happen like that.
And we post a lot of this process stuff on like our Patreon. Like, I guess that's a plug for our Patreon. But like,
yeah, do it. Yeah. Go for it. Plug whatever you want.
Subscribe to our Patreon.
We have like a behind the scenes like zone on our Patreon where we have been posting these thumbnails. Like Belle will post her thumbnails so you can see what they look like.
They look really ratty.
They're like just little like chicken scratch, like with like stick figures on them. And I mean, thumbnails can be that simple.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not enough information. I
think the best thing about, if I may toot my own horn, the best thing about my thumbnails is that I like to draw really exaggerated character expressions on them.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like your expressions carry over to the final draft. And I'm like, this is why it is the way it is.
You've been influenced by me.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I am nerding out right now. You guys have no idea. You've giving us so much good insight. So I love that idea of the writer actually participating in the early visual stages through thumbnails, because I think a lot of times writers and artists kind of have this issue of like, you didn't have the vision that I wanted, but the vision wasn't communicated.
Mm-hmm. That was definitely a problem that we had in ARH, was that like I always had these really strong visual images in my head when it came to the certain scenes that I was writing. And then when it was interpreted, I'm like, that's nothing like how I wanted it to be. And you kind of feel like it's being lost somewhere. And then you have to tell the artist to redo a page that they just drawn, and they get very mad at you for that.
But like, I'm not in your head, but like, wouldn't you say like as years have gone by, you can't think of your original vision?
Oh yeah, no. When I reread ARH, I don't give a shit about what was cut out. It's fine.
It's like whatever makes it to the paper in the end usually is like whatever is the final thing. Usually you don't remember the other ideas.
Yeah. And that goes for things that you cut out earlier too. Like if there's a line of dialogue that you're really fond of and you have to get rid of it and you feel really sad about it, you don't remember it in a month. It's fine.
Yes, I've found that the translation from like initial script to starting to imagine how things are actually going to look visually, a lot of things get cut. And that's something that I've discussed on the podcast and the channel before, is this idea of like kill your darlings. And because I know a writer asked me to specifically discuss this, could you talk more about how do you cut dialogue? How do you decide what stays in and what stays out and what's actually needed for the story?
That's a really good question. Basically, when I cut dialogue, I like to write dialogue. I like to write banter. I like to write fun conversations. And banter is usually the first thing that gets cut. Anything that is like considered to be excessive gets just axed almost immediately. But I'll always keep in things that need to progress the storyline and things that are considered to be information that I need to reveal to the audience. So if I'm revealing like a character's background or a story plot line that's going to come back later or something like that, that has to stay in. And that is usually like almost everything that makes it. I don't include stuff that isn't necessary to the storyline. I'll wrap it up usually with something that makes it seem like it's not directly plot related, but I think almost everything in the dialogue is plot related.
Yeah. I feel like usually a lot of the fun lines end up getting cut and sometimes inappropriate lines.
Yes. I like to swear a lot when I'm writing, and the excessive sex jokes that I make.
like she'll write things and it's like, this is not gonna fly. And so we'll have to change it or we tone it down and we try to get things across that we want to get across. And I think in the end it's for the best.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, I need to have some restraint. I'm just reflecting as I'm saying that as you're saying.
you're trying to think of what we cut out.
Yeah,
who's gonna make it.
It's nothing important, I assure you.
Now, something I really want to celebrate is, wow, is the dialogue that is in the comic really witty and funny and really shows the characters really well. And with that, we also get some really complex, morally gray characters. And so you've even made like a disclaimer in the artist comments, like, hey, just so you know, we don't condone this kind of behavior, which personally I didn't think was necessary, but I appreciated it. It's like, yeah, I get that this is not okay. But in wanting to, like, thinking about wanting to show restraint, like not having a bunch of sex jokes, and also like being mindful of how things might be framed. Do you ever feel limited in that regard? Like if putting something in would like come across in the wrong way?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
I think this is one of our main concerns
right now. Yeah.
Because we are dealing with morally gray characters, and I feel like the scene on the internet right now is...
We're talking about Electric Bones right now, right?
Yeah, we're talking about Electric Bones, and we're talking about like past scenes that have just happened.
Yeah. So the scene in Electric Bones basically is just like the main character of the storyline, who you see the story through, is sexually harassing another character. Who, it's like, obviously we don't intend for that to be something that people replicate. We don't condone that, but there's definitely a sort of shift in perspective about how people read and interpret things, I feel, especially younger audiences, where they could see depiction as endorsement. So that's why we feel we have to be really careful about what we do and how we portray things.
Yeah. And we still want to depict the story, and that's like keeping us through the entire thing. So it is important to us to like have these like morally great characters.
I don't think I'd be able to write a story like that didn't have a character who wasn't flawed in some way. Like I can't just write a story about a character who isn't flawed.
Yeah.
It's not as interesting to me as a character who's perfect. So that was something that I definitely wanted to keep, and we knew that we would have to be mindful when we did it.
Yeah. And we continue to be mindful.
We try. We really try.
Yes, I mean, kudos. I think that you've struck that balance really well. I think it's dangerous when we kind of like self-censor and are afraid to address more serious or deeper topics, but at the same time it's important to like handle those things sensitively. So I definitely agree.
Yeah, it's just when you're writing for yourself, you can write whatever you want to. You can have fun with it. When you're making concepts, you can just go your wild, basically. And then when it becomes the reality of like putting it on the internet and having other people read it, then you sort of need to like take a step back and think, okay, how is somebody who is not me going to interpret this?
In the end, this is up to like the creator's wants and needs. So if the creator wants to do something, I'm not going to stop them from doing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
So this is just how we are functioning.
Yeah. High anxiety.
So that's another question too for you guys as a team. When you are dealing with what's the word? I guess like sensitive material. How do you communicate that to each other? Like, do you find that important in collaboration?
Well, we're very vocal, I think, about addressing our concerns or like our worries. We tend to worry a lot. I definitely worry a lot.
Yeah.
So when I'm worried about something, I'll definitely say I'm worried about XYZ.
And usually if you are initially worried about something, you're going to be worried about it again. Like the worry doesn't go away. So you should address it. Like if you have anxiety about that sort of thing, then you should try to make it so that you won't worry about it anymore.
Right from the back, because it doesn't go away.
Definitely, yeah. And being verbal and at the same time, like be willing to take those risks. Yeah.
Yeah, like taking like people's comment like and criticism, I guess, about certain things, and then be willing to change things that are already like published on your website.
Oh yeah, we've definitely done that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually for the best, and it only ends up like in the future you only are like more grateful for that, for doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Definitely. I think that's something I kind of want to embrace more too, is this idea that when criticism is constructive, it only stands to make your story better. So it's good to be open-minded to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely taken that criticism and
it's not like
change
we
things.
take every single thing that people say. We of course don't do that. But things that we think are important and that are like valid that people say, we will apply them.
Yeah.
Definitely. And now just again, kind of talking about the story and its themes, we have this really interesting exploration of identity. We have what is sentience, which by the way, my one request would have also been robots. Robots is my favorite thing.
I got you.
Yes, you got me. We also have like lookalikes and multiple aliases. So there's, at least I hope I'm not just reading into things. There seems to be this exploration of identity. And is that the case? And do you consciously kind of think about theme, and what common themes are you kind of exploring in your work?
Yeah, I would definitely say that we think about themes, and that's definitely something that's part of like Electric Bones, this concept of identity. I think that, yeah, so this concept of identity came from this idea of like how we our own experiences when we create an identity for ourselves making a comic, and then have this character for ourselves where we interact with people online, we publish a comic. This is our identity as like comic artists. But then in real life, we have different names, we have different jobs, and we interact with other people in different ways. So it was like creating an alias that, in a way, the comic alias was something that I felt more proud of than my own person in real life. So that was something that I really, that was like the identity feeling that I had when I was creating Lucy's character. Because Lucy doesn't feel proud of himself, but he does feel proud of his alias.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was one of the major themes. Like everyone in the comic has, not everyone, but the major characters have their own struggles with personal identity, and that's sort of where it comes from. That was our original concept for that.
Yeah, I think there was this comparison between like the creation of like versus robots versus humans.
Yeah.
And how like robots are man-made and also humans are man-made. So I think there's a contrast between that maybe you don't normally think about.
Electric Bones also has a theme about control in it as well, about how you control your identity and how you control other people and that kind of stuff.
Like we like control technology like in every way day of life, or at least we feel like we control technology.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're just on the computer every day or our phones every day, and you're like, what is it? Is it controlling me? We're not really. We're kind of exploring that kind of thing, but that's not.
It's not the main purpose of the story, but it's kind of like our theme.
Not that specific version of control, but control in general is a theme.
Yeah, control is a theme, and identity is a theme.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Those are like mind-blowing concepts. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we have this kind of struggle of like this online persona as artists, but then also kind of being different people in our day-to-day lives as well. That's a perfect example of kind of like write what you know, but how to kind of incorporate that into a creative story rather than just autobiography.
Yeah. That's something that I felt with ARH too, is for ARH, I was afraid of a similar like feeling that I was having around that time. And it's definitely not autobiographical, but it's just like the sort of internal struggles that you do have that you can sort of reflect into other situations and on other characters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Do you feel that sci-fi as a genre is, or rather has potential for like raising philosophical questions?
I think that's entirely what sci-fi's purpose is.
Yes.
I feel like we like that aspect of sci-fi, but we want to take sci-fi in basically like a more, I guess, like feminine direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we watch so many sci-fi movies and other sci-fi things in preparation for making a sci-fi comic and doing what we wanted, and there was just things that just make you angry when you're watching them. And then things that are really great, like there's really great things, and then there's also things that just make you angry, and I
think it's like the sort of the movies we watch, a lot of them are kind of very poppy and very like pop culture sort of movies, and not something like, we didn't read a whole lot of like deep science fiction novels. I didn't read Dune or anything like that, but it's kind of like a lot of the science fiction movies that I was watching, I was kind of noticing this exploration of the sci-fi genre, but it was done through like female bodies. Like, so you would have like a sexy female robot, or you have like feminine like faces of like really, really like sexualized people in
if there's
advertising.
A male robot, they're buff and huge, and they don't even look like a human. They're just that way. But then the female robots all are curvy and sexy, and we wanted to do something with that.
Well, that was one of the things we wanted to do with, but it's like the concept of exploring technology through female bodies was something that I wanted to move away from when we were doing this.
Yeah.
Granted, we do have a lot of sexy female robots too.
I don't mind equal opportunity.
Yeah, that was what we were doing. Equal opportunity.
Right. So that kind of goes back to something that was brought up earlier about this idea of creating the story that you wish existed.
Yeah, that's entirely what it is. We just wanted to feel kind of like we were watching a pop movie in a way, like a sci-fi movie that could come out in theaters, but it was something that we wanted to see.
We're not even very far yet, so we can't even like fully articulate the scope of this, but it has a movie-like plot line.
Yeah, it does. That was something we were definitely thinking about when I was writing it, because I wanted to make something that like had these acts to it, that was taking place over a very short time period, and that sort of had this fun movie romp feeling. I don't know. It's supposed to be very theatrical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like an homage to sci-fi, but also kind of like a subversion as well.
I guess so, yeah. I don't know if I would go so far to say it's subversive, but
I think by the fact that we are making it, it's already subversive.
Maybe, yeah.
Or like,
well, something else I really want to celebrate is just how immersive it is. I joked at the beginning before we started recording that this is so good it makes me mad. I'm just like, okay, fine. I just don't need to make comics anymore because perfection is already been achieved.
That's really nice to hear.
Thank you. That's very sweet of you.
I mean, it's well deserved. This podcast is just me making people uncomfortable by complimenting them for an hour. So I hope you're okay with that.
I am not uncomfortable.
Okay, wonderful. Then we shall proceed. So when it comes to world building, I think that's something that is very cohesive within the writing and the artwork. So in creating a sci-fi world, what would be your advice for making unique environments that kind of take their readers to a different world?
Like, I think Belle leaves a lot of world building up to interpretation, to put it lightly, whereas I'm in the art stage and I'm like, I have no idea what this ship is going to look like. And I have I literally almost no direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of reference things that I like, and things that I want for these sci-fi things to look like, in terms of like, I don't want to say what I'm inspired by, but I basically pick a theme for, I mean, I don't want to say what the theme is for Electric Bones because otherwise I'll be giving things away, but pick a theme for all your sci-fi stuff to kind of match to. And we have an overarching thing, and I'm just applying technology to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then referencing, like, say, retro, like airports and like cafeterias. And like, I'm looking at a lot of retro stuff. And I think Belle was saying like some stuff was inspiring you.
Yeah, I think the retro future aspect was something that Hazel really wanted to do. Like, that was something that you were inspired by visually. You have a bunch of these photos saved in files that you go back to look at to get inspiration about certain things. You also, I think the visual path that Electric Bones is taking, it's kind of like early 1900s, like Art Deco feeling to maybe more mid-century. There's a lot of different styles that we're sort of going through.
Yeah, I'm not targeting anywhere specific.
Yeah.
I'm just going with what I like.
Yeah, which isn't like chrome and shiny and like pointy things.
I like this more decorative version of like a sci-fi universe.
Mm-hmm. It feels really lush.
Yeah.
Excellent. And in acknowledging kind of where you're sort of drawing inspiration from, for both of you, who would you say are your main sources of inspiration? Like, how have you developed a unique visual style and as well as a unique writing style?
One of my favorite like anime is like Toward the Terra. So since high school, I've liked that show and I wanted to do like a sci-fi. And the creator, like, well, the anime was made in 2007, but it's based on an 80s manga by Keiko Takemiya. And I just like her. Like, it's like really retro and cool. But I would say, like, from Western references, like, I love J.C. Leyendecker, Mary Blair. Like, those are, like, I like this very sleek suit aesthetic, but I also like this really simple cartoony aesthetic. So I try to not necessarily blend them, but those are some of my inspirations for illustrators. Just like, we also reference movies, not actively, but just internally.
Yeah.
We like consume movies. And I think that shows, like, say, like Satoshi Kon's movies. We watched like Perfect Blue before this, and that was really good.
Mm-hmm. That was one of my favorite ones we watched.
Even though, it's not like a regular sci-fi.
No.
I
wouldn't even call it really sci-fi, but it
has a really good atmosphere.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
So I guess if we're talking about my writing inspirations, I don't really know what my writing inspiration exactly would be, because I have a certain, I consume a lot of different writing, and I've consumed writing since I was a kid. So there's a saying one of my favorite writers has, Maggie Stiefvater. She says that writers are thieves. Writers like to take little bits of writing from other writers that they like, and they like to take it all together like little magpies and make their own thing from that. So I probably have definitely taken little things from other writers that I like to make my own thing, but I can't even begin to say where they came from.
Because you're not actively looking at them. You just have them all in your head.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So if I'm to like give credit to writers who inspire me, there's probably a very, very long list of writers who inspire me, who have made me be the writer I am today. But if we're talking about specifics for Electric Bones, I don't even know where to start. Like, I don't know.
You don't consume a lot of sci-fi novels.
No, it's
like, you can't. I don't even.
I think that if we're talking about, I have a fantasy novel I'm writing right now, and I can definitely pinpoint the books that inspired me for that, because fantasy is something that I really enjoy. But for science fiction, I'm like, what is it?
I feel like I was more driving the science fiction angle.
I think 2001 Space Odyssey is probably one of the science fiction movies that had the most impact on me. And I think you can even tell that in the story as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my number one. I saw that when I was 10 and it emotionally scared me.
And then we rewatched it for Electric Bones.
Yeah, when we were
spring.
doing our research, and I liked it a lot more the second time I saw it. It was really good.
I think that's about
Yeah.
it for like style. Like originally I was inspired by manga, and then after like working on webcomics for 9 years, your style like just it develops on its own. And I do like life drawing stuff, and I do like practice things.
Mhm.
And if you like hone your craft, like you will eventually improve. And I think just putting in those hours on the webcomic is so useful.
Mm-hmm. The webcomic is when people come up. Can I go on a tangent here?
Please do.
When people go up to come up to us at a convention and they say, "I want to start my webcomic, but my art isn't good enough yet." That is the reason why you should start a webcomic, is because the webcomic will make your art improve like nothing else will. Like not going to art school, not taking life drawing classes. The life drawing class will definitely help, but webcomics will make you draw for every single week, like drawing things that you don't want to draw, drawing angles you don't want to draw, and that makes your art improve like nothing else.
Yes,
Yeah.
I could not agree more. We were talking about 2001 Space Odyssey, and I believe you were about to talk about The Matrix.
Yes. Yeah, we watched The Matrix. You've liked The Matrix since you were a kid.
Yeah, I always before I was even, I think I was too young for The Matrix.
I was too young for 2001.
And so I was 9 years old, and I really wanted to watch it. And I think after a couple years, I asked my parents, I'm like, please, can I watch The Matrix? And that's how I was always interested in these kind of sci-fi movies. And it was like just as good as I wanted it to be. And we just saw the trending today about how
it was a trans allegory.
Yeah, it was a trans allegory. And I was like, this is just really cool.
Yeah. It's like good woman making sci-fi is stuff that I like.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Now that we're thinking about inspirations, like I was like, if you're thinking about things that inspire you, like I'm gonna say like 2001 inspired me, but then the more I think about it, the more I'm like, the movie that I think influenced Electric Bones the most was probably Blade Runner, because we saw Blade Runner and we hated it.
It's a strong word.
Maybe not hate. Hate's a strong word. I didn't hate everything about it. We were really excited to watch it because we thought we'd really like it, and we didn't like it.
Neither of us watched it until we were adults,
Mhm.
and so weren't really like clouded by nostalgia, which I think a lot of people who saw it when it came out or shortly after it came out were influenced by. And you can see how a lot of the things in the movie
they don't really age well.
They don't age well.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing is just like the visuals and the shots and just like the world building
the world is really good.
Really good.
I really like that. I liked a lot of aspects of the story too, but I think there was a lot of it too that just made me straight up uncomfortable, and I just felt like, as like, when you're watching it as a woman, you feel almost completely excluded from the narrative. And that was the main thing that we wanted to, like, I don't know. I mean, it's not like Electric Bones has a really strong female presence yet, but we wanted to make something that felt like, well, we didn't like Blade Runner, so we should make something that we do like.
Yeah.
That was the main thing driving us, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. You can't see it, but the whole time you were talking, I was just nodding aggressively because I have like a love-hate relationship with Blade Runner as well. And just like a lot of Philip K. Dick's work as by extension. I'm curious. What were your thoughts on 2049?
I haven't seen it.
I saw the trailer and that made me really mad.
We both just watched the trailer.
We watched the trailer and I'm like, I'm not watching this movie. But I kind of want to see it too because the visuals do look stunning. But at the same time, I know that I'm probably going to be like,
there's still a bunch of movies that we have, sci-fi movies that we're planning on watching that we haven't watched yet. And yeah, I don't know if that's on our list, but
I made a tweet years ago after seeing the 2049 trailer before the movie was released, and I basically, like, I had a rant about it, about how I felt like the trailer was just focusing on all these, like, here we're illustrating science fiction and all these the technological aspects of this world through like sexy female bodies. And that was basically why we made Electric Bones. so like, if you distill it, it goes down to that trailer, I guess. The 2049 trailer is just like, that kickstarted this.
These are the kind of emotions that'll carry you through starting a webcomic project.
Yes, frustration.
Yes, I would encourage you to check it out. I think it's a little bit more like self-aware and subversive than it
Oh,
seems at
okay.
first. So
Good.
a lot of people disagree with me on that. A lot of people are
Mhm.
like, "This is anti-feminist trash." So I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
know.
No, I shouldn't judge a movie by its trailer by any means. It's just that was my first reaction seeing it. It's like, this is what they're selling it on, the basis of, like, the giant naked female holograms and, like,
Mhm.
the innocent-looking female robots and, like, this sort of, like, the women are, like, these objects to communicate technological development through, and if that's not what the movie's about, if the movie tries to, like, put a spin on it, I'm interested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, I'm like,
Yeah.
well, it can be interpreted differently. So
Yeah, of course.
it's not free of problems, but
Yeah.
yeah, I
What
think
is?
that is such
Yeah.
a good point too about how like frustration and like loss of potential can also be like a really good motivator. Like you're
Mhm.
like, I like this, but why did they have to do that?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
totally.
happens to us pretty often.
There's a lot of things that I consider to be, like, my favorite movies, and I always have to be like, "Well, I don't like this part of it, but I like this part. I like everything else. I like these ideas that they do, but I'm just gonna ignore this aspect that they touch."
Yes. So, as someone who works on fantasy projects as well, I'm always
Mhm.
kind of interested in this overlap and the differences between sci-fi and fantasy. For both of you, what do you feel kind of separates the two, and what do they have in common?
I think that your stepdad we talked to him about science fiction because he's a big science fiction guy, and he said that what we're working on isn't actually science fiction, it's like science fantasy, or like it's just like
Mm.
a fantasy version of science fiction, because science fiction is something that's just, it's more of like a realistic thing. So maybe
We're
that's,
not
yeah.
spending a lot of time on the world building technicalities and how things are functioning.
Like, yeah, exactly.
That's not very important to us, to explain or predict the future.
Yeah, or in make it sort of something that could happen, like a speculative reality. This is
Mhm.
more like we're just telling a fantasy story with a backdrop of a future.
I would say that it's like an alternate reality.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be from this time forward at any point. Maybe the tropes are different, and
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
I mean, like, your the dialogue is different. The things for science fiction, you always had to, like, come up with little things to replace technology that you use in everyday life. Like, what are they using for their phones? What are they using for, like, their cars? What are they using for those little things? But for a fantasy, you basically already have it because it already happened at some degree. Like, fantasy is like, you can do modern fantasy too, but I think everybody likes to do like the Tolkienish,
yeah,
like,
I was gonna say, like, I
yeah.
feel like they both have different origins. So
Mhm.
sci-fi comes from all these older sci-fi books.
Yeah, like those pulpy
Yeah,
sci-fis,
and
yeah.
then a lot of fantasy is based on Tolkien.
Mhm. Which
So
based on other things, but most of the, like, modern fantasies comes from that source.
yeah. How about your fantasy? Like, how do you want to talk about your inspirations or no?
I mean, I probably, it's like everything distills back to Tolkien. I read Harry Potter a lot as a kid. Let's not talk about that. I read a lot of, there's a writer called Lynn Flowing. I read a lot of her books when I was a teen, and those kind of made me really want to write my own fantasy novel. It had such
when
a fun atmosphere to them.
when I first met Belle, one of the first things she was like, "Read these books." It was the Night Runner like
Yeah,
books,
series, yeah.
and that was like at the start of our friendship.
Yeah.
So like, this is part of the basis of your character.
Yeah.
at least like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Not it doesn't get mentioned that much now.
No, but it still influences me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like a lot of the sort of classic fantasy stuff, like riding horses, doing archery,
I feel like
the kingdoms,
I
princesses.
was really into like the His Dark Materials, like Golden Compass series when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and I feel like that is like kind of like a blend of sci-fi and fantasy.
It is totally, yeah.
And I like that sort of thing.
It's almost like steampunk, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of steampunk.
Yeah.
But I think we consider them like different, like fantasy and sci-fi are like different genres,
Yeah.
but they're both, I guess, enjoyed by the same sorts of people.
Yeah, definitely. Because they both sort of involve this careful world building and construction, and you need to, like, come up with things like
A critique on your reality, I would say.
you could, yeah, totally. Yeah, you can reflect reality like your world in these worlds too. So that's usually where things like mega corporations and science fiction come from, or like allegories of like racism in fantasy novels. Like those things all come out when you write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that is so true. I think it's rife for exploring those kinds of concepts, but also kind of doing so in like a fun and entertaining way.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that kind of makes me want to bring up world building. I think your comic is a really great example of effective world building because a lot of it is communicated through dialogue. And then, like I've mentioned before, the environments are very immersive. I think it took me a long time to read what is posted of the comic just because I was like staring at everything.
Yay.
So, what would be your world building tips?
I am not very like I don't like to world build. I just want to write the story of the characters, and then when I hit this point at a wall where I'm like, I need to explain the world that they exist in, I sit down with myself for like 2 weeks. I don't get anything done except for trying to like flesh out the universe.
I feel like this becomes a bit of a problem.
It definitely does.
When I'm rereading, I think it more tends towards the novels, light novels, because that relies more on description, and whereas in the comics I can pick up where you left off and I can just make it up. But when she's doing her writing, I need more world building here, and I'm like, flesh it out. I want to hear more.
Yeah.
And I think you just need that encouragement. Like, you have ideas, but you need to spend time. With world building, you need to actively spend time planning and constructing things, and that's a different brain, I think, than writing.
It is a different brain.
So you need to like switch modes, and I'm like that when I'm planning, like, say, the Electric Bones, all the scenery in Electric Bones. I spend a certain amount of days, different from making the comic pages, like where I'm planning each like scene and the clothing and that sort of thing. And you need to factor that into your schedule.
Yeah.
And so each time there's a new scene coming up, I'm like, oh boy, okay, I have to plan out the
visuals,
how it's gonna look,
yeah,
and make it like consistent, and what color is this scene gonna be. And like colors are like very strong for me to communicate like a mood, and it's really important to me. Even since making our other comic, that was a lot of the comments that we got, is that I really like the color, and that's what I enjoy doing the most, is coloring the comic. And I think that it shows.
Yeah, for Electric Bones world building, for me, I think that it was something that I was delving deep into. Like, I had this idea, this really basic idea, and I was interacting with these like for the storyline, and I just did enough world building to basically carry the storyline over. And then I ended up writing these background novels for Lucy's backstory. And when I did that, I had to really delve into the universe. So I had to come up with like the galaxy government. I had to come up with different planets. I had to come up with colonies. I had to come up with lineages of like certain families that had power, that lost power. I had to cover all these bases that I didn't have to do in the main comic because I wasn't going to touch on those themes. So
but, yeah, you're like not naturally inclined to come up with those things.
No, I don't.
Before like just delving straight into the script. So you found that the character was like different in the novel than in the comic, and so it might need reworking.
Oh yeah, I'm not recommending you go out and read them, but
well, maybe if you want to.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're bad, but I think posting anything on the internet is just sort of like a draft.
Yeah.
Like the comic pages, I hope, don't need to be fixed too much, but whatever you post,
writing wise, the writing's going to change.
It can be changed.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't feel too emotionally attached to what is in those stories.
Anyway, so I just came up with a world building tip. Can I give a world building tip?
Sure.
Okay. So the world building tip that I want to make is make rules for yourself, because I think that in the beginning I had no idea of where I was going to go. Like I was like, I'll come up with some planet names and stuff, and then you just need to make it like come up with like a bare bones structure of like, if you're writing a fantasy novel, come up with the bare bones structure of the different countries, the different regions and their leaders, or come up with, like for a sci-fi universe, like the different planets and their governments or their leaders or their languages. And then from there, you'll end up going back to use that when you need to.
Yeah.
That is a really good idea. Yeah, just keep it consistent, and
Yeah.
that's a good way to do that.
Because you'll have to come back at some point, and you're like, I need to come up with this person who comes from a different planet. I need a planet.
Checks my notes.
Yeah, checks my notes. What planet do I have? Oh, I have this one. You can use that, and then you expand on that from there on out.
Yeah, I think there's, again, more great insight on working as a team as well, and how world building is an aspect that writers and artists kind of need to work on together. So I like having that information too.
Yeah.
And I think having the world building kind of come up organically through kind of taking a character-based approach is actually really clever.
Yeah, I think that not a lot of sci-fi grows that way. I think a lot of sci-fi grows from like basic concepts, and I think
The universe,
ours are things that you want to say, but initially our world came from characters that we wanted to have.
Everything was subject to the characters rather than the world, which is a different approach than a lot of stories.
I think in that way you're able to like relate it to like real life better, because it's like these are characters who could be in our universe, but they're not. We had a funny joke. It was actually yesterday that we do you want to say about what the AU would have been for Electric Bones?
Yeah, if Electric Bones is set in our universe, it would be taking place at like a tech conference where we'd be wearing like the company emblazoned polo shirts. I
was joking. I was like, what should they wear for the next scene? I was like, it'll just be polo shirts with like their company logo on
with
them.
lanyards.
With lanyards. But that's not going to happen. No. But it will be funny. You may see it in the future as a joke.
Sorry, that was
I'd
a
also
tangent.
love to circle back to what was said about coloring. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was going to ask what was the favorite part of the artistic process. What role do you feel that color has in storytelling?
I would say strongly the mood. So I don't think we were talking about the process before, and we stopped at thumbnails. So I suppose I will pick up from there and then move into color. So after like thumbnails, I do the sketches, and it's like kind of fun for me, or it's okay. And then Belle will review them, and she'll be like, no, and then I'll cry. Like usually sometimes metaphorically and sometimes literally, but usually not. And then I'll line the pages after they've been approved, and then I think the lining takes me the longest, because I'm not naturally like inclined to do lining, and I've tried to like work myself up to it more recently just by being like, I think I just want to be very specific when I'm lining and not very free. So I just need to tell myself like, just go with what comes naturally with the lines, like don't erase, like sort of thing. Try to like let it flow better, and I think that it comes faster that way. But it requires some mental coaching. Whereas with the colors, I just sort of dive in and I just start coloring the page.
I don't see you for a week.
I have a vision in my head of what I want it to look like. Like, say for Electric Bones in this scene with Ezra's room, I wanted it to be really green, because Ezra's like color is like this aqua green, and then as I was coloring it, I was like, oh, red is like a contrast color, so it has like this burgundy shadow in the room. So that is like a complementary color. So I will do that sort of thing. Each character and scene like has a different like kind of color mood in the comic. I'm not really sure. But sometimes these things aren't fully planned out until I'm in the final stages of coloring, and then I'm constantly changing the color like on Photoshop to see what looks the best. Yeah. For something like the bar, we wanted it to have this really warm, or it has like this kind of club atmosphere. And then where Ezra is, it's like red, because it's like has this like sexy mood. And red like has that kind of connotation, as opposed to like green, which is creepy. So I'm thinking about these things when I'm coloring.
Yes, that's so much good, like food for thought as far as color theory goes. I think an extension of mood, an extension of character, of atmosphere, those are all really great things to be thinking about.
So I color the pages, and then after that, Belle will go and put text on them. And it's at this point, sometimes things will change, and there will be new dialogue that is added because she thinks that it matches better to what I drew than what it originally was. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh yeah, it's just like something I usually do for like an hour at the end before the picture goes or the page goes up, where I just like tweak something. Maybe I'll add like a line or two, or maybe I will get rid of something just to like make it flow better with the page. Because usually some things change while the page is being developed.
Yeah.
There'll be a character expression that looks more intense or less intense, so I'll change the dialogue.
I will leave areas where I think that the text goes, but we don't put the text bubbles on until last.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will just go over it and make sure, because I'm kind of like a perfectionist, or I'm like I am the one who wants to have control. So I just make sure that everything is like to my liking, like to the best of my ability, and then I will like resize it, and then we'll upload it onto all the various websites.
Yeah, that's
that's the process. And then you start it over again.
Yeah.
The next week.
Yes. Why do we do this to ourselves? Continuous, which speaking of, you've done this to yourself before. Let's talk about why webcomics. How did you become a part of this world, and kind of what are your insights on just like the pros and cons of working within this kind of medium?
So I would say that the pros of working on webcomics is that you have a distribution network that you would not have if you're doing self-publishing. You have almost complete control of your property. You're not sharing it with a company. You're not sharing it with an agent. Most of the time you don't share with an agent. So it's like you will have complete control over it, and you have direct access to your audience, which gives you a large degree of power over your property. And I think that's really important for people, especially who are starting out. You're not going to get like there's a lot of things that you can't achieve with online comics. Like we're sort of coming across that now, where if we want to reach a larger audience, say like in bookstores, we can't just like give our book to a bookstore. You need to go through a publisher, you need to get distribution, you need to do all those things. But you can find an audience that is very like you can target the exact audience you want to target. You can do something that's a niche story and still be popular because you're reaching people that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise through traditional means.
In the same sense, like it is accessible for creators too.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of creator from like any kind of background that has time they want to spend on doing this. Webcomics are like a great way for them to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then show what they're doing and practice and then become better. And when we started out, like there was a few webcomics that were like going on, and we like looked at what they were doing and we just made our own thing, but we had those in mind.
Yeah.
And at the time we cross-posted to SmackJeeves, or that was the original place where we posted Always Reading Here. And it was very rough, but people were still willing to give it a try, which like surprised us, because we basically started like our own persona, a new identity online, started it. And we brought no fans, nobody with us. Those people all came organically from SmackJeeves and Tumblr. And then we finished Always Reading Here after 5 years, posting to both sites and all of like the social media. And Webtoon really hadn't gained ground at that point. Like, I think it was a thing, but we weren't really interested in posting there. But then when we started Electric Bones, we like looked at the scene and we're like, well, a lot of people are reading on Tapas and Webtoon. So we decided to cross post there while we started the new comic.
The great thing about if you're posting to these like webcomic sites like Tapas, Webtoon, or SmackJeeves even, is that they have a built-in audience of people there who are looking for new content to consume. So people are going to be going there because there's already popular comic show they read, but they also want to find more comics too. And that's the best way to grow your audience, is from when you just start out, is this group of people who want to read new things.
Yeah, you can start from nothing and go to these sites and have someone read your work.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good.
It's really rewarding, especially when you're first starting out, and to have people who are commenting who are excited to read your stuff. So I highly recommend it if you're starting a webcomic out. There's a couple downsides to posting on these websites. Sometimes they're like, you have to read their terms of services to make sure that you're not signing your life away or anything like that. And sometimes I find that on Webtoon, the discussion, there can be like misinformation spread in the comment section. For some reason, a lot of people don't read the author's note on Webtoon, and we found that kind of shocking, honestly. So you need to level of moderation is kind of limited compared to if you're on your own website.
Yeah, I think Tapas is better.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to go into that being wary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. the pros are awesome, but I think some of the platforms are still growing. They
Yeah,
have some
definitely.
things they could work on.
Yeah, it's not a big complaint. It's just like just something you need to keep in mind is that you're gonna have people asking about like something in the comments, and you're like, "How did you come to that conclusion? Did you read the author's note?"
I think, yeah,
Right.
what stopped us rather than the commenters, because the people will comment anywhere and everywhere at any level, and it was just like the terms of service with these websites that was the most concerning, like initially, and I think that they have changed their terms of service to appeal to artists more
Mhm.
in the past couple of years, so that's good for all of us.
Yeah.
But I think if you're doing something like selling your comic higher, they have stuff like first dibs on offering you printing. So if you're really like invested in your project, you should definitely read the terms of service before you start posting your comic.
Mhm.
What has it been like for you as a team experiencing having a project that has been around for a while and was popular, and then now having to kind of start over again with a new project?
I
Uh,
wouldn't say it's not hard because it is
yeah,
hard.
it's a bit of a blow to the ego.
I feel like I don't know if it was easier starting from nothing versus starting from having an audience that already has expectations. Both of them are difficult in different ways.
I think we're more confident now than we were when we first started. We know what we're doing, so I think we're also confident in like because Electric Bones' audience in general is fairly small compared to Always Raining Here when we were doing it. But I think we kind of know that there's a reason for that is because Electric Bones is still in its infancy and we're still working towards the parts of the story that get people excited.
We've seen these like growth spurts like with our previous comics, so we know like kind of when they'll happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not surprised that it hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. Yeah. We there's a certain element to stories that get people to come in droves, and we know that if we want people to come, all we need to do is get to that point.
So I'm asking for a friend.
Mhm.
When does that normally happen?
It happens when it happens. For us, the thing, if I'm gonna go a bit PG-13 here. So for us, it happened in Always Raining Here when they kissed for the first time. People
Mm.
will share those scenes. They'll get excited about them. It gets a massive influx of people coming to your comic if it's a romance comic. If there's like a little bit of romance happening in our comic,
You mean the new comic?
the new comic in Electric Bones. I can't say when this is going to happen, but we have an idea of when the audience spikes will happen based on things that are happening in the storyline.
Good
It's
to
just
know.
it's just
Yeah.
because people will get excited about it, share with their friends because they want their friends to read it too because they're excited about it, and then that's the most natural way that we have seen audience expansion in our stories.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
What important lessons do you feel like you learned in your first major webcomic that you are now carrying into Electric Bones?
I would say that we talked a lot about them already. Like working on the thumbnails together
Mm.
was probably the biggest change that we made, like a conscious change we made from Always Journey Here to Electric Bones.
I think like it is like scheduling and time management. I mean, you tell yourself that you should improve on these things, but you don't necessarily improve.
Just a goal there.
I think yeah, art. I think I learned a lot on the art, but those are sort of more gradual lessons or just like paneling. Like if you compare the last page of any page of Electric Bones to like the first pages of Always Raining Here, you will see that we learned things that I can't really articulate.
Mhm.
Definitely. I definitely had a thing when I was writing Always Raining Here for the first time. I would go into like I would be a lot more generous with the dialogue because I wanted to include all my fun banter dialogue, and I got that drilled out of me throughout making the comics where I'm like, I need to only include the stuff that's necessary to the story. And we have found that in Electric Bones, I have retained that to the point where the there's parts where Hazel wants me to expand on things, or she wants
Mm.
me to like have a pause where it's just a page of scenery, and I don't account for that because I'm so used to just driving the storyline on the dialogue rather than the visuals because
Yeah.
it was like a slice of life comic before this one, so it wasn't something that you needed like whole pages of like environment exposition.
But I think like a sci-fi universe, you spend longer on that
You
sort of thing.
definitely you want to see the visuals, you want to spend time just having a breath to look at the environment, so I'm still getting used to that.
Yeah, I think there's lessons that you learn
Hmm.
all the time.
Yeah, you're just constantly learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or relearning something that you thought you already knew. You're like, oh, didn't we have this discussion already? Like that happens constantly, where you think you've overcome something and then it just comes back.
It's like, oh yes, this character flaw that I have is back.
Yes, it's not so linear again. It's kind of like, oh, right, I forgot. Like, I need to incorporate this again.
Yeah,
definitely.
Knowing that you guys have done a Kickstarter, that you are on Patreon, that I believe you're a part of Webtoon's ad revenue program, what tools do you think kind of serve to empower creators nowadays?
I'd say Patreon's definitely a big one. I don't really notice about the ad revenue breakdown. Like, we haven't really seen a whole lot from that yet, but it could just be because we're small.
We were getting most of the Webtoon ad revenue from Always Reading Here, and that's all been posted now. So I'm not sure how that's gonna like pan out, but I think that there is money there that you can have if you have a large audience. For Patreon, definitely good if you already have an audience. I'm not sure how constructive it would be if you didn't. You might just be like making. I think it would be more constructive to just post things for free at first to gain an audience. And then at some point you would start a Patreon.
I think Kickstarter is possibly the most it's one of the greatest tools for comic artists to print their comics, because it's something that before crowdsourcing you had to go to a publisher to do this kind of thing. Otherwise you're risking like $10,000 of investment of your own personal money to do this. And it's incredibly liberating to have people who are willing to like pre-order your comic for you and basically fund it through the pre-order process. It really is a huge tool for comic artists to use. I think it's great.
Yeah. Definitely, if you have a comic that's mostly finished, Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, there's
really great.
There's a double-edged sword there.
Like I would advise against starting a Kickstarter for a comic that's not like
finished,
mostly completed.
Yeah, because even after you finish a comic, you still need to go through the process of laying it out as a book, creating a cover, creating your the goodies that you're going to be giving people through the Kickstarter as rewards. There's so much work that goes into a Kickstarter.
There's like the physical labor, but there's also the mental labor of like having this money thing hanging over your head. And that's not necessarily something you want when you're trying to like creatively make your comic.
Yeah, definitely wait till it's done when you do that.
You mentioned earlier that as a team, you are able to kind of hold each other accountable. Do you have any other time management tips?
We're not pretty good at time management.
I think the best thing you can do is make a schedule and try to stick to it that is realistic. And I think there's a saying that things will always take like 3 times longer than you think that they will. So it's good to account for that. Not necessarily saying it'll take that long, but it'll probably take longer than you think.
We started doing this with Electric Bones. We have a meeting every week on Monday, where we'll like get coffee or something. Before the pandemic happened, we would go out to a cafe and sit down somewhere nice. And we would go over our plans for the week. So we would talk about, I'm going to get this done this week and this done this week. And we would, by sort of refreshing our minds about what we were going to do, that's definitely helped make it so that we weren't juggling a bunch of things and we're lost focus on what we wanted to get done.
Yeah, we keep each other accountable that way, I think, and just checking in on what each other is doing.
Yeah.
Nice. With all that in mind, is there anything in particular that you both do to ensure work-life balance? And is there a special thing you do just for yourself?
I'm just going to like go out and say that I think it's like unrealistic to say it's not going to take over your entire life if you start a webcomic. Like, at least at the beginning, if you're really invested, it's going to take a lot of your time, and probably things will fall off the wayside. And just like, if you're starting a webcomic and you're feeling exhausted, like take a break, like talk to your friends and family. It'll be there for you. And then you were going to say something.
Oh yeah. So I think that more than the work-life balance, like I find that I have a good work-life balance, but that's because I'm not the one working on the art. The art takes the most time to do. So like there's sometimes where I can go home after the end of the day, but Hazel ends up working till like 2 a.m. because she's doing the lines or the colors, and I've already done my work, so I can go to bed. So in that way, like it's not really it's more of a commitment if you're doing the art for your time management.
We have different work habits.
Yes, we do. Also, I don't like working at nighttime. But I would say that as somebody who spends a lot of time with world building and creating stories, like I have two different universes that I'm juggling in my head right now, and I've spent a lot of time spend a lot of my time thinking about my stories. Is that it's more important to consume other content besides your own content. It's like get out and read a book that isn't yours, or watch a movie that you is unrelated to like something that you've seen before, or just like expand your horizons that way. Just like make sure that you are giving yourself new experiences, because otherwise you won't be able to produce creative work that feels authentic. It'll just feel like something you're rehashing.
You'll rehash yourself.
Yeah, you need to expand yourself as a person before you can write an interesting story, I think.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, what a concept, right? I love it.
I find that sometimes when my writing is getting stale, I'll find a writer who I like and I'll read their book, and then my writing will just sort of like rebloom. I'll have internal narratives in my head that sound like everything sounds a bit fresher. So I think that experiencing other people's work is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Very
thing
true.
the thing
Go ahead.
about us having different work schedules, like I am the artist and I am working up late, and it's a bit, I think we look at it differently. That's why I'm like, well, it just takes over my entire life, because I just spend a lot of the time
Each
doing the art.
page for art takes about 12 hours.
And I think that's something that like, I'm not the writer, but we've talked about this, and writers need to give a little bit in like what we were talking about before, creatively, for the plot to make the artist like invested, because they are going to spend all this time on the comic.
Like as a writer, you can do other projects. Like I try to make myself busy, not only working on the script, but also working on other things. But Hazel can only work on the comic.
For something like our Patreon, we're trying to balance the work by having Belle do extra writing to give to our patrons, whereas I am mostly focused on doing the comic work like completely.
Yes. Okay. I know that all of the people who listen to this and our writer artist teams are just going to get such a kick out of this episode. So I love it.
So.
Yeah. Now, we had some technical glitches. I kept you here longer. So I just want to, first of all, thank you for your patience and your time.
No problem. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it was great.
Just sort of moving in the direction of wrapping up, I would love to hear both of your thoughts on what is your general advice? What do you want the artists and writers to know?
Keep at it. Don't give up.
I would say do what you love and do the things that will inspire you, like the whole length of your project. Because it is a labor of love. So
yeah, don't work on something because you think it's going to be popular. Work on something that you want to see. That's the most important thing. I would also say be kind to yourself. I think everyone should be kind to themselves,
especially right now.
Yeah, just don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't turn out perfect. That's another thing too. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah,
usually it's not going to be perfect, especially if it's your first comic. It's not going to be perfect. You got to accept that.
I was gonna say, in terms of like the time management question, like if you don't meet your deadline, like don't beat yourself up about it. Like I think it's good to like reflect, but like actively beating yourself up and feeling bad is like not very constructive. And you're just kind of hurting yourself. So just keep like moving along and working on your comic, and then trying to make the deadlines that you set after that.
Done is better than perfect.
Very true. If people would like to find all of your work, where all on social media could they find you?
We have Twitter. We also have Tumblr. I don't know what people like nowadays.
We're on Twitter.
We're on Twitter. We're actively on Twitter.
So I have a Twitter called Raspberry Hazel, at Raspberry Hazel, and Belle is at Belle Has a Bat. But then we also have our Twitters for our comics. So we have at _Electric Bones, I think it is, or Electric Bones _ I don't know, something like that. And we also have a similar one for Always Raining Here with the underscores. But you could just go to our website, electricbonescomic.com and alwaysraininghere.com. And if you search us on Webtoon or Tapas, Electric Bones will appear on both of those to read if you prefer that way.
Yeah. All the social media.
You could just Google.
Yeah, just Google it.
Google it. It'll come up.
Awesome. And I will also have that all linked below in the description when this goes up. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. I love hearing your thoughts, and I think that this information is going to be really beneficial.
Well, thank you so much. It was a really fun conversation to have.
It was really nice to talk and share like what we've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again to Hazel and Belle for their time. All of their info will be linked in the description below. My editor's Instagram is also in the description. Check her out. Her work is awesome. Thank you again, Zoe, for helping me with this episode. If you are interested in my work, you can check that out as well. My webcomic is also about robots, and it is called Soul Match. As always, thank you guys so much for listening. Let me know if you have a webcomic or if you have any recommendations for me. I am going to be taking a bit of a formal hiatus this time, not just an unexpected one, because I really want to get chapter 2 of my comic done before the end of this year, so I hope y'all don't mind that. Check out my Instagram for more updates as far as when you can expect us to be back. And I hope you understand. I appreciate you guys sticking around, and I will see you when I see you after the break. Thank you guys so much. Bye.